So welcome everyone. I think it's fantastic. We've got a great turn up, and I can see people from a lot of different areas. Um, what we're going to do tonight was just sort of go through what we've been doing with the cover cropping workshops, the multi-species cover cropping, and it's sort of after Stipa had Gabe Brown as a presenter in Victoria and New South Wales. So I was just going to put up a quick agenda, um, and we might just reorganise it and hopefully Cole will come in. Otherwise, I'll come back and do that benefits of multi-species cover cropping. So just an introduction, Stipe, which is sort of like basically Cole and I have been running these workshops. We've run quite a few in Victoria, some in New South Wales, southeastern Queensland and central Queensland. So there's great interest at the moment. Oh, there's someone I can recognise their name. Welcome, Cole. And so what we've been doing is working. I can't see a microphone for you, Cole. So I'll just see if I can turn it on. So yeah, so it's been going really well, and we've gone for a different style of presenting. It's making sure that people go home knowing what they need to do. I can see he's sort of there, but I can't get him to hear him just yet.
Can you?
So that
Am I
people
okay
know
now?
what to. Yeah, perfect now. So. Um,
Okay.
which is just perfect timing as always, just to hand over to you. So, yeah, so um, otherwise I was going to be coal size as well. So, yeah, so this is what I was going to try and go through today. So we'll get Cole to talk about the benefits of multi-species cover cropping. And then I was just going to quickly talk about designing your multi-species cover crop. And then Fraser's going to talk about his practical experience, and we'll swap in and out with Cole as well. And then just a bit of a question and answer and any next steps if we can come. So um, make participant, turn camera on. I'll probably have to go through, Cole, and just let me know when you want to change slides. But are you ready? Are
Yep.
you okay to take over now? So
Yep. Yep. No, whenever you like. Yep.
yeah, that'd be good. Just some of the benefits, or why would you multi-species cover crop?
Okay. Yep. Well, probably should start with what actually is it. Um, what actually is cover cropping, and it's there's a few different definitions of that, and actually there's annual cover cropping and perennial cover cropping. We're going to talk about mostly tonight about multi-species cover cropping, where we're using a range of different plants in a mix to create desired outcomes. But cover cropping is actually a, a version of an old technique called green manuring, which was done 200 years ago. But I guess we've taken it to another level. And this form of cropping is now being adopted around the world, um, where we're planting in this case a mix of different species, annual plants into into a paddock. The other version of cover cropping is actually perennial cover cropping, which is pasture cropping that myself and Darryl Clough developed quite a few years ago. A lot of people don't realise that pasture cropping is also cover cropping. But why would you cover crop in the first place? There obviously has to be good reason to grow mixes of crops. It hasn't been done very much at all before, so why would you do it? Um, and why you do it would depend on what you're doing on your farms. If you're a continuous cropper, as in growing just crops without animals, there's a few advantages in that as well. But there's also advantages in mixed farming enterprises. If we look at continuous cropping without animals, the cover crops can be used as a soil biological primer. In other words, it will kickstart soil microbiology um, from a point where if the soils are dead, basically dysfunctional, it'll kickstart them and feed soil microbes and get soils alive again. Um, Other things that it'll do is nutrient cycling and nutrient availability. In other words, it'll make nutrients available um, uh, to a following crop. Like the multi-species crops in cropping programs are used often to prime the soil for a following cash crop. And a lot of that advantage is better nutrient cycling and making nutrients available. Now, this is done with different mixes of species, which I will cover more later. A lot of our soils around the world really are suffering from very poor soil structure, compacted soils, old plough pans, that type of stuff. Um, uh, the right mix of species will also fix um, soil poor soil structure and using plants as biological subsoilers. Um, having different mixes of plants will also control and manage insect attack in following crops, and also will manage and control many crop diseases in following cash crops. Um, and well, the big player in this, which most people really often forget about, is our farms should function as ecosystems. And when we get a mix of species in a paddock, it starts functioning very much like a grassland with a great mix of species and great diversity, and starts driving the whole farm ecosystem. And the obvious thing in this is more profit. Now, in mixed farms, as in where we're running animals as well as growing crops, the great benefit of that is all the stuff I just spoke about in cropping programs can be applied, and this mix of species of crops, multi-species crops, will give all the benefits I just described. But one of the great benefits of a mix of species is far better grazing uh, potential, or not only far better grazing value. Um, the multi-species crops, and I've seen it here when I've compared them with oats on its own, um, is far better weight gains, far better growth rates, and far better stock health, as in no metabolic diseases. And all of that is a great advantage. Trying to finish young animals, they'll do far better on these multi-species crops than just a single species like a oats or a barley crop. That's about mainly what I've got. Other than Graham, you may be able to just show some of those slides there with some of those multi-species crops. That's a crop that I had that was last year, multi-species. These are all pasture crop multi-species crops, which I hadn't spoken that much about. So they're sown into grassland, and in that crop there's oats as the base, um, uh, tillage radish or daikon radish, pea, turnip, and faba bean, and vetch in there. So and that crop worked well. Very good stock feed. Um, the paddocks are always better after those crops as well. Better soil structure and all of those benefits that I spoke about. Just another one. Yep, that shows a bit more of the native grass in there. Like when with cropping multi-species crops, they're sown primarily when the summer grass, well, the native grasses are dormant in their winter dormancy. And that photo there, you can see field peas and oats. There's a lot of other stuff in there as well, a lot of brassicas, turnips in there, but in amongst the grasses. I don't know what else I've got on there, Graham. I've got the other photos. Oh, this is just interesting. I'll show you a bit about. This is more about pasture cropping. This is harvesting a crop a couple of years ago, crop of oats, and in that photo you can see the green in underneath the crop. If we go on to the next slide, um, that's all summer growing native grasses in that crop in amongst that crop as the crop is being harvested. They're just starting to grow as the grain is ripening. And the next slide will show you the great benefit of having that. Um, Now that's those same taken in the same area, just a few weeks after harvest, and they're again all perennial summer native grasses. And if you just think about the feed value in that crop, um, for any animals, sheep or cattle, we use those areas to wean our young wean merino lambs on. Um, so there's lots of benefits in these multi-species crops or in pasture cropping. Uh, so I think that's all the slides I've got. Graham, we want to
Yeah,
go on a bit
yeah,
further from there.
that was yeah, yeah. No, that's cool, and we'll get you back in for the questions and just some comments. I'm just getting some people typing in that they're losing every 10th word. So if you are Rebecca, could you just let me know whether that's any better when I'm presenting, apart from that it's me um, and not Cole. The so
I should stop
I
waving
was
my arms around.
yeah for sure. You can't talk without your hands. So
No,
hopefully, I was just going to go through what we do in the workshops, and what we find is that and I think Fraser will talk about this a bit later as well, is that what we did before the workshops was to get people to put down their resource issues. So was it compaction, was it soil carbon, was it weeds, was it erosion? So this is the one I wrote, sort of, and we've been using that to okay, so Dave's gone to Chrome, and hope that's better, Dave. The but what we found was that sort of you had to really focus in what is your resource issue, because when we're trying to design the mix, you actually sort of have to have it so that it addresses that. So I put my key focus as soil carbon, and secondary I was going to use it for grazing. Um, it's pretty important in my mind that we do think about grazing and what we're going to do there. And then just a bit of a paddock information. So it was just our vines paddock. I was going to do just a little strip within it. Um, and this was really interesting once we started working this through. So it was a phalaris dominant with some perennial ryegrass and a few wild oats, that sort of paddock. Good earthy smell, and I've got the photos on the next slide of what the paddock looked like at the time. Um, Sorry, some of the sowing information. I was going to borrow a John Shearer with very narrow point spacings, um, needed for feed in August. Um, I'd sent some samples um, the soil to the lab to get the Haney soil test done, just to see what sort of was going to go. And we were sort of organic but not accredited, so which is quite interesting. Sort of, we don't have to be, but that's sort of how we sell our meat whenever we sell it. So, um, and then what really comes out of that is that if I want to put in a winter cover crop, this was for a winter cover crop, so planting, autumn, early winter, that it wasn't going to work because um, the phalaris would be too dominant, and it would swamp the winter growing annuals. So we then got to that point. Well, is there another paddock that had less grass in it, or were we going to use a really powerful herbicide to really shock the phalaris and give it enough space to get the grass in? So that's a common theme that we'll come back to, that you really need to know the plants that are in that paddock, and whether there's going to be a good mix. And I'm sure Cole will have more to say about that. These were the photos, so just some photos across the paddock, down into the paddock, and then some idea of the soil and how that's going. So yeah, so that's the sort of information we get, and then we use that in the group to sort of question people about what practices, what they've done before, to try and determine what's a safe to fail trial or practice that they can have on this. So like on our area, 2.5 hectares makes no difference. So we just said, oh, well, yeah, that's a sort of a safe to fail trial. But because it's already Phalaris dominant, as soon as the Phalaris wakes up, it'll come up and take out the cover crop without using a lot of herbicide. So that was why we went for another paddock. So yeah, so that's the type of information we get from people, and I'm sure it's pretty obvious. Sort of that allows you to design. So what Colin and I then did was work all the way through it so that we'd focus on each individual farm one at a time and make sure that they went away with a preparation of the paddock, um, recommendation sort of a multi-species cover crop mix that would suit them. So we have different carbon nitrogen ratios and of what the different mixes are. So which we can, if you want to drop me an email, we can provide those or fill out that form was what I was going to suggest. And if you wanted to do that, and then sort of we could have a bit of a work through. But what works best is sort of to do that in a workshop. So this is what we're trying to get between the plants. So the the it's really clear that the difference between degrading agriculture and regenerative agriculture is a decomposing litter between the plants. So in a perennial grassland, you'll have decomposing litter. That's a moderate decomposition under David Tongway's landscape function grading. So um, and that's what we're trying to do, that deep litter layer that's starting to decompose. So just quickly, this is the issues that we've been seeing with all the different cover crops that we've done. So if we're planting a winter multi-species cover crop, it's unlikely to work if you have plants like Phalaris, cocksfoot, and perennial ryegrass. You'd have to really belt them into submission. We have seen some people be successful with Phalaris, but they were very broad spacings. You could hardly step from one Phalaris plant to another. You'd have to really like be a good long jumper to get from one plant to another. They then took out the annual weeds, um, and what they did was they successfully got a winter cover crop into winter growing perennials. But generally, if you had those plants, you wouldn't be looking at a winter cover crop. So soil testing, the one we've been sort of recommending is the Haney soil test, and we can give some more information on that. Fertilizer is an interesting one. If the soil structure is poor, if the soil's not very healthy, then you're going to need some fertilizer probably to get the crop out of the ground. And if you can use herbicide, uh, we can do that. Any comments, Cole? Can you hear me?
You're going well. No, that's
Oh,
fine.
good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's important what
Yeah.
you've said. Important what you've said about, especially if you're not going to use a herbicide, to be aware of what's not possible or going to make it very difficult. And what you've said about those winter growing species, it's very difficult to get a winter growing crop amongst those winter growing perennial species. In other words, pick on another
Good.
paddock.
Yeah, pick another paddock. Yep. Um, and then those herbicides. So while we're going through those issues with people, we also do that. We put some ideas up on mixes, and I've got cost down the bottom, but this is sort of loops back in between cost and the modification. If people have got seed on hand, and so I'm driving the computer, and Cole's up there, sort of redesigning as they go with their cover crops, sort of what they can take out, what they've got, how do we lower the cost all the time? One of the things we're trying to focus on is that we lower people's risk and also lower people's costs to make sure that they can actually get this to work. Was really interesting, and Fraser might talk about it as well a bit later, is that insect control was really interesting for me, that quite a few of the conventional farmers that were at the course, with no restrictions, they took action on insect control, whereas others didn't worry and sort of may have sacrificed some of their broadleaves. Um, I think that the grazing is incredibly important with the multi-species cover crop, and I'll let Fraser talk about that, and making sure that we do a trial that's of the right size, so that you're not actually sort of losing money trying to get the soil health. We want the soil health to improve at the same time that we actually um, are making a profit. So how do we design it so it makes a profit and improves the soil health? And just some of the things that, if you count the number of grazing days, for people that have got around that $35 a day gross margin per sheep, we've been doing sort of a 10 cents per DSE day, but we calculate that for people so to make sure that they're making enough money out of it. Um, is there a change in landscape function? You're sort of trying to get that decomposing litter, some measures of soil health. Did you get a harvest, and did it lower the cost of the next crop? It was really clear traveling with Gabe that he only ever does a couple of years of cover cropping, and then if he's not going to cash crop in that paddock, he does 2 years of cover cropping and then goes back to sort of his prairie perennial grass mix. Um, so I was now going to pass over to you, Fraser. Are you still able and with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I've got that bit of a delay happening, but I'm right to go whenever you want.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, all right, no worries. Well, thanks for having me on, and hello to everyone out there. I was just going to run through a little bit of background on what I've done over the past 5 or 6 years. Um, Graham and Cole, don't be afraid to ask any questions or point me in the right direction as we go. Um, so we farm near Shepparton at Ardmona and uh, northern Victoria, so we're in a fairly strong irrigation district. I farm with my parents and my wife and two children. Yeah, we have subsurface drip irrigation and centre pivot irrigation. That's kind of what we've got, and that's what we've got to work with. So it's a very high cost structure. So we need some pretty intense activities happening on that area. Uh, so we grow corn, sunflowers, wheat, barley, canola, faba beans. Um, we also do some hay and silage, and recently we've just bought cattle back on the property, which has unlocked a lot of the missing pieces to the puzzle, which has been really good. I'll go into that a little bit more later. Um, so just going back sort of 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, and prior to that, we'd sort of, we've got this irrigation and we've got good soils and good climate and everything, but we just weren't achieving, good yields, good profitability, um, and the conventional wisdom of putting more on wasn't working, and I could see that, and just putting more on just didn't give you more out the other end. So that was a sort of a major frustration. I couldn't understand what was going on. I couldn't understand our soils. But I knew that sort of biological farming was made a lot of sense to me. Um, so we started going down that path with no till as well. And in terms of biological farming, I'm talking about no insecticides or fungicides, which we haven't done for quite some time, or probably 5 years now, 4 years. Still use some herbicides, but use them as sparingly as possible. We're focused on biologically friendly fertilisers, and we increase our diversity through cover crops and the cattle. keep tillage to a minimum, and feed the soil life using livestock manures and crop residues to really power that cycling that soil life on. And around this time that we sort of moved to biological farming, I also saw this YouTube clip called Undercover Farmers, and it was a North American thing about rolling down diverse cover crops and planting corn straight into them and that sort of thing. And I thought, oh, that's the go. So I started growing these diverse cover crops and rolling them down. And for me, I ended up having a lot of issues with that. Uh, just rolling them down with a roller crimper, and it just seemed like a real wasted resource to me as well. Even though people say we're feeding you below ground livestock, it still just didn't quite add up, and plus it was causing other issues with slugs and sort of lack of soil air. So that sort of brought us to oh, we had some fairly major issues with the corn crop 2 years ago. Um, After we'd rolled all these cover crops down, and we grew a terrible corn crop, and financially that was quite difficult. Um, so that sort of took me back to square one. And around the same time, I did a holistic management course, and I guess bringing cattle into the operation was seen as maybe one of the missing pieces. So sort of that was just finished that holistic management course a couple of years ago. Um, so since then, we've been trying to get the cattle into the operation, and it's only over the last year that we've been slow.
Hmm. Can you hear me, Cole?
Yeah, I can. Everything went quiet
Yeah,
there for a second. Oh, it's still here. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Lost Fraser. Yeah, I think I've lost Fraser as well. So,
Yeah.
um, well, we'll
Yeah.
just wait and see if he comes back in. But we might go on, Cole. So what I had next was sort of the question and answer, um, and whether people. And I was just trying to get some ideas from that. Yeah, Sarah's typing, and Alan's lost Fraser as well. So
Okay.
I was
Looks
just
like they've
really
all lost
thinking,
Fraser. Okay.
yeah, which is, I don't, and he's dropped off my list that I've got here as he's no longer there as a presenter. Um, that was going
Did you
well
have any
too.
photos of Fraser with the cat? Did you have any photos of Fraser with the cat, Fraser's cattle on the crop,
No,
in your
no, but
presentation? Okay.
yeah, I've got a. It was only the one photo of Fraser. I've got a
Okay.
a question from Sarah about the issue with the corn. Um, was it not matching nutrient requirements and tie-up, or problems with seed to soil contact? Do you know why that corn crop failed? It was after the rolling down, wasn't it? And that he had
Yeah.
terrible slug problems.
Yeah, I know there were slug problems. There may have also been a carbon to nitrogen ratio problem too. So it may have run out of it may have run out of nitrogen. But I don't really know. Hopefully Fraser will come back on and be able to answer that. But yeah, we did have
Yeah,
slug problems, which yeah, the cattle
Can you hear me
solved
now,
all of
Graham?
those
yeah,
problems.
we can. Everyone was just starting to enjoy you, and you just.
Before I left
The
you.
questions have been about the corn while you've been getting back on, Fraser. Sort of, what was the issue? Why did that fail? Oh, is he gone? You
Sorry,
still
Graham, you
there?
just broke up on me. Where
It says he's.
where did I get up to when I lost you before? You lost me.
Oh well, you talked the crimper and how you'd lost that corn crop, which wasn't You did that really lovely understated sort of um, created a bit of an issue. But the questions while you were away, the questions were, what was the issue with the corn not matching? Was it not matching the nutrient requirements? Was there tie up, or was there problems with soil to seed contact?
There's a whole heap of different issues with it, as far as I could see. Underneath that, the soil was improving, but there was a carbon nitrogen issue there. There was a soil air issue. There wasn't. It was a bit too waterlogged. I think there was some compaction as well. Um, there's a whole host of issues. We had the slugs in that in underneath there too, which was causing some loss of plant population. So there's really a whole lot of issues that, to point at just one thing, it was really just a bit of a, you know, ecosystem shutting down a bit is how I would have seen it. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So it was just after that, and I think you were up to about what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. I talked about the trial a little bit. Um, what we're doing at the trial for grazing cover crops for profit, which I think it'd be good if we could make that available to everyone, the booklet on that.
Hmm.
Um,
Definitely.
and I think I might just talk now about a case study on what I'm doing, like with the actual seeds I'm sowing in the ground today, just to make it sort of fairly relevant.
Hmm.
So, so what we're doing at the moment is oversowing a lucerne stand. It's a good lucerne stand. There's plenty of plants there. We've only just sowed it last spring. Um, my sort of resource concerns in this paddock is soil improvement because it had to be cultivated before we sowed it with the lucerne. Um, Soil priming for that lucerne for next summer when we're going to be doing hay on there. Also to help soil infiltration because which is once again that sort of structural issues associated with because we will be doing hay, lucerne, with that lucerne during summer. So you get a lot of the compaction issues and soil infiltration issues there. So that's one of the major resource concerns. But also now that we've got cattle to provide some more feed and hay and silage, and also this particular paddock is is organic um, in conversion. So weed control is another, like controlling winter weeds. If we get something in there now, I feel like that should compete with the winter weeds. Um, so that they're the resource concerns. So this is the I'm just pulling it up on my computer now. This is the mix that I come up with, and I'll just go through the rates and the reason why I'm doing it. You still with me there, Graham?
Yep, that's good.
Yeah. So I've put 15 kilograms of cereal rye and 15 kilograms of oats in there, and also there is some barley in there too. I put that in the cereal rye and the oats for that soil health, soil building, uh, plus the grazing capacity there. And because we're sowing it so early, those those because they're spring types of cereal, they'll get grazed out or terminated, during winter. So I put a winter wheat in as well, and I put 40 kilograms of that in, a fairly good rate, because that will hopefully come through in the winter time for more grazing. I put 40 kilograms of vetch in as a legume component to hopefully sort of power those cereals along because the lucerne um, nodules won't be really firing just yet on that lucerne plant. I wouldn't suspect, so I don't think it'll hurt to have some legumes in there, and I've also got some balanza clover and some fava beans. And once again, the faba beans will probably get grazed out, and maybe the vetch to an extent, but the balancer will come back um, after winter. Also put some daikon radish in there to try to get that root penetration down a bit deeper and bust up any sort of hard pans that could be there. And we've also put in 5 kilograms of corn and 2 kilograms of sunflower, and they're really just to get uh, a bit more feed, like a bit more growth this early in the. We've still got a lot of warmth in the season, so we can get quite a bit of growth on the corn and the sunflowers. Plus, it's also ticking the boxes with. I don't know whether we've been through this yet, but we group all of our species into either cool season or warm season and grass or broadleaf. So you got the 4 categories. So by putting in corn and sunflowers, I'm ticking um, two out of 4 of those boxes. So you get so in that mix, I've got all those 4 categories in the mix. So that's
Okay.
basically all I have to add there, Graham. I think I said it. I think I talked for about 3 or 4 minutes before I realised that I wasn't on there. So I lost a bit of
Yeah,
content,
yeah.
but anyway.
I, I may have been having a nana nap, but I missed any details on the trial. Um,
Yeah, do you
so
want me to
I
talk
didn't
about the
hear any
trial a
of
little
that.
bit, or?
Yeah, I've said I'll send the booklet, but if you just mention what that was about, that'd be great. So,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, basically, Landcare. I was talking to Joe Doolan from the Landcare Network, and she was sort of asking what types of trials would be relevant. So and at that stage, we were sort of thinking about and were bringing cattle back into the enterprise and the cover, and we've been doing the cover crops for a fair while. So I sort of thought, well, hang on, it'd be really nice to see whether these cover crops and the cattle are actually more profitable than what we would have been doing otherwise, and whether they actually were improving the soil health. So that was basically how the trial started. So I was really measuring whether grazing cover crops uh, does improve profitability and soil health. So we basically split a paddock in half and said one side of the fence we're just going to do a standard practice of hay for oats and vetch for hay, and on the other side we're going to do a multi-species grazing crop and graze that, and then once the hay's off and the grazing's done, we're going to put corn in and see whether we can see any profitability differences between and soil differences between each side of the fence. Uh, and so far, we haven't harvested the corn yet, but it does look better on the cover crop side. Profitability, depending on what weight gain you use, was was at least the same, if not a lot better for the, the cover crop. And we could have done the multi-species cover crop a lot better. We could have sown it earlier. We could have grazed it better. Um, and it was finished sooner than the hay too. So there's an opportunity to get the corn in early. So yeah, so that's basically the trial, Graham.
that was great. Got a few questions for you. I didn't get numbers for amounts for the Balança clover, the Faber beans, and the daikon radish.
Sure. I must have lost track there. Yeah, the Balancer I'm putting in at 2 kilograms. The Faber beans 20
Hmm.
kilograms. 1 kilogram of the daikon radish. I think
Yep.
that was all that was missing. Yeah.
Yeah, yep, got the lot. And a question from Sarah. Any chenopod's in the mix, spinach, beetroots, etc. And then Graham's sake sort of,
Yeah, that's a really
so
interesting
Graham's
one.
sake, I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I've seen Graham talk about that, getting the chenopods in the mix. And they're actually technically I did put a very small handful of fodder beet in, which I'm pretty sure is a chenopod. So there will be you might find the odd one. And I know he talks about the chennapods, and he's sort of got the five different species. So he has, I think he sort of has cereals, grasses, legumes, brassicas, and chennapods, and he likes to see one of each of them in the mix, which we've got all of them except for not much chennapods. But I'd like to actually like to see where he gets that from. I just haven't been able to pull that from anywhere where there's anyone else has been sort of saying that, or where there's some farmers doing it, or yeah. So if anyone has that information, I'd be really interested to see it actually.
Good,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll just comment on it a bit. Um, I don't know whether it really matters so much, other than we want diversity in there. Um, uh, that's where I think the the brassicas, well, that mix of four that you mentioned there before is important. Um, as much a mix of say legumes and brassicas and grass type plants, as in wheat, oats, barley, all that type of thing, is important. There is a bit coming through from the States about some of the chenopod stuff, but I've never seen a huge benefit in it. But there would be a benefit, there's no doubt. But I don't know whether there's been a lot of work done on those mixes.
Okay, very good. I've got uh, a question here from Rebecca Gorman that how would you have grazed it better, Fraser?
Um, I should have. Well, it should have been sown earlier, and I think that's a good question. Actually, that's something I'm probably learning a bit more as I get back into grading cattle. But I think that we probably could have sown it earlier and grazed it earlier, and maybe got a couple of quicker grazings and regrowth rather than what we did, which was pretty much just one big crash grazing that terminated most of the species in the mix, and then a really light one of a bit of regrowth after that. What do you think, Graham? You sort of saw a bit what we did too.
Yeah, the only thing that I thought that I strongly agreed that you said at the open day, the field day that we had, was that sort of almost in those conditions, almost be taking them off when rain's anticipated, because you did feel that there was a bit of pugging, but then when I went in and measured the landscape function and stood in the canopy, it was sort of hard to pick that it hadn't gone better than the hay crop anyway. So it'd only be so that you can get that regrowth. Any comments, Cole?
Uh, yeah, no, it's fair enough to get animals off if it's going to pug, but I think it's probably overrated. I don't think animals do as much damage as we think. But I mean, if they're going to bog down to their bellies, well, that's a bit of a different story.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, and which is what you observed there too with the two crops, Graham. Um, but
Mm,
yeah, it's probably good to be just to play on the safe side and get them off. But yes, it's not as big a problem, I
Yeah,
don't think, as we think.
yeah.
I think that would have been better for the grazing, uh, but better for the soil. But I don't think it would have probably changed the outcome that much of the sort of biomass that we consumed. I don't think, but it certainly would have helped some of
Hmm.
the compaction.
Yeah. Another question from Alan. Just was it Popany vetch, Popany vetch for winter growth?
There was actually in that
Thick.
which mix if we're talking about the one in the trial, it was a bit of Popany, a bit of Rosina. We're talking about the mix that I'm just saying today. It was a bit, it was actually a bit of Popany and Rosina as well, but I only put a bit of Rosina in it because I had a little bit on hand. and I thought it wouldn't hurt for diversity. But Poppany for me works really well. So yeah.
Um, yeah, and uh, um, Martin Williams from Ningens also. I hope people can see that post. Let me know if you can't, but he's put his name there. He's been doing cover crops and he's got some cover crop seed if people wanted to contact Martin directly. Uh, um, yeah,
And
Sarah, I might. Uh,
Ma-
yeah,
go on.
sure.
Yeah, Martin had put a multi-species crop in last year or year before probably, and then uh, harvested the seed off it and then cleaned, as in a whole heap of daikon radish off that crop, and he has seed available to sell off it. And it was just daikon. If anyone looking for some cover crop mixes and specifically daikon radish.
And then a question for you, Fraser, from Mick Wetnall. How have you addressed your slug issue without baiting, or did you
Well,
bait really? So
yeah, when we had the slug issue, it was when I was having a lot of different soil issues at the time, and we were baiting, which didn't seem to work that well. Um, but since then, I've sort of realised that, or come to the conclusion that we've got a lot of drainage issues and soil air issues in our soil. So I've been going through a program of improving the drainage, which means more cultivation on our property. And I think that combined with not having so much residue just sitting above the surface of the soil um, has really addressed that problem. And I'm really confident going forward with cattle grazing that they're just not going to be an issue like they have been in the past. The biggest problem was the home that we're providing for them with all that residue sitting just above the surface, not like in the soil. So you've sort of talked to me a bit about that, Graham. What in terms of the habitat for the
yeah,
slug?
yeah. If the litter's not actually in contact with the soil surface, so can be colonized by the soil bugs or soil biota, then it actually provides the conditions that harbors a lot of like slugs and things like that. So if you push it onto the soil surface, um, you tend to let it be colonized and it doesn't create those conditions. So and a lot of that insect killing um, fungi live in the root zones of healthy plants. So the more this all goes, the better it all is. Yeah, so I was just reading Sarah's comment as well that she's saying that what Martin has done is shown that you can harvest a multi-species crop and segregate it various ways depending on the skill of the operator. And mono-species doesn't have to be the only way we go anymore. So, which is really good stuff. So, yeah,
A
I
question,
don't think
Grant.
of yeah, sure.
I just wanted to ask Fraser, just to add to what he was saying there. Did he think that? Well, was there a slug problem there in where it was grazed with the cattle? It appears as though there wasn't. So the cattle themselves grazing that area, did that reduce the slug problem?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, that's sort of why I feel very confident going forward that we're not going to have any slug issues because it just doesn't provide the habitat for them. And I've definitely seen that since we've had the cattle. So, once again, having the cattle in there as a tool sort of ticks a lot of different boxes. It's great, really.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll add to
and
that in that cropping programs, we should have animals in there for many benefits, for profit, but also for ecological benefits like you just described.
Yeah, I completely agree, and to me, it's really standing out um, since I've because we're up to about 135 head now, and we're sort of starting to get a decent number, and it's pretty new to us um, in the way that we're managing it, and it's really standing out to me. Um, like, I mean, we want to do it so that there's profit in it, but just as a tool, it's just opened up so many doors that I didn't even know were there. It's I don't know. I don't know how I'd farmed without them now. I've got them.
It's music to my ears, Fraser.
I thought you'd like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So is there anyone? I was just going to open the chat up so that I think we've got enough battery power so that if anyone had a microphone, they might be able to speak now. Oh, the thing's going crazy saying I've got too many people. I don't at all. Um, yeah, so is there anyone wanted to volunteer or did they have any other questions? I think everyone should be able to speak now if they've got a microphone. Anyone else? No. So what I was thinking was that I will send out I'll send out sort of this cover cropping design so that you've got that. I'll send out that Fraser was talking about. I may have dropped him. That was why I was hesitating. No, there he is. Um, yeah. So and then if you've got any other questions and things, I'll send out that booklet on the trial that Fraser did at his place, and anyone else? Any other comments? Hoping people can still hear me. Can you hear me, Cole?
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, mine's gone quite slow. So, um, and then if I send that out and if you have any questions, you can sort of send it back in and we can go from there. Rebecca can hear me. Good. Thanks, Rebecca. And yes, so and Alan can hear again. So really, I was just sort of going to do a bit of a plug for the Stipa multi-species cropping. So the way we've been doing it is to do a series of 3 workshops. So one for your sort of putting in your winter cropping, one for grazing it and harvesting it, and then um, one for designing your summer one. So that seems to work well over time. So, but it usually needs some external funding. Typically, we've got some from the sort of the reef money from Central Queensland and some Landcare money sort of and CMA money in Victoria. So it really sort of needs a little bit just because it tends to be a bit expensive for the individual farms otherwise. But yeah, let us know if we would, and we might be able to chase them up and then even work together on how we could do that and sort of try and work that out. So any closing thoughts, Cole or Fraser?
Oh yeah, Graham. I'll just make
I
a
think
comment on the
yeah,
on
right.
the multi-species workshop. Having attended it, I think that it was just so worth doing in the fact that we get to look at everyone's specific situation and put together specific mix for that uh, operation. Because the more I've got into the cover cropping, you do need a specific mix for your particular situation. I don't think you can just have just a standard mix that anyone can use. So to get that sort of one-on-one attention to your own specific circumstances is just really important for this cover cropping stuff. So yeah, just a bit of a plug there for if you can get any more workshops up and running. I think people would get a lot out of it.
Thanks, Fraser. Cole, any closing statements,
I think
thoughts?
we've covered it pretty well. As Fraser's pointing out the benefits of of grazing this cover crops is really good, and I think that's where the big fit is. Like that extra quality of grazing and the benefits that the animals do as multi-species crops is certainly worthwhile.
Fantastic. Any other questions before we wrap her up? Anyone wanted to shout out or type something? If not, it's pretty close to the hour. So thanks everyone for your attendance and questions and engagement. That was great. And I'll make sure to send out that information that we've discussed. And if you have any questions or comments or feedback, that'd be fantastic. So thanks, Fraser. Thanks, Cole. And thanks, everyone. And we might finish there.
Thanks, guys. See you all later.
Thank you. Good. Thank you.
Sorry, everyone. I meant to stop the recording and kicked myself out. So um, I'll go back through those questions and try and provide answers as well. For your time, and we'll talk to you later.